Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of Worldwide Battle Royale. If you didn't see the last episode, Russia decided to betray China, and that didn't work out for them. And then we saw the Pink Alliance get crushed by the Yellow Alliance, and so that's how this is what the map looks like. Then we also saw Bosnia get invaded, so now the Yellow Alliance and the Green Alliance are at war, and that's where we're at right now. So the first thing that's going to happen in this war is that this little claim the Green Alliance has over here is going to get invaded into. Because really the Green Alliance is mostly focused in Europe and Asia, and they're not going to really have a chance elsewhere. So this is also going to apply to over here, where China uses the same strategy as last time of just not really defending their Californian colony, which means the US has to fend for themselves, and at this point they are weaker by like a pretty significant amount than Canada, and they are going to start losing this war very quickly. Spain is also helping from their Floridian colony. But the US obviously isn't just going to surrender, so instead they're going to fight till the bitter end, and this is going to be very good for their alliance. But I'm just going to show them getting destroyed. So where is the Green Alliance doing well? Well, right here for one. Greece is not really standing a chance with the new colonies they literally just got. They're losing them very quickly. They managed to hold out here, but Cyprus is captured, and Tunisia is also losing territory, losing the entire Sinai, as Nigeria starts getting invaded into over here. Meanwhile, Greece is also suffering from the north, with Bulgaria, Kosovo, Albania all coming down upon them, and they're barely holding on. Italy quickly reseizes Sicily before getting on the defensive, as the Yellow Alliance is actually on the offensive in the west at least, but they're not very strong at it. They make a landing in Tunis and capture the capital of Tunisia, which sends Tunis into a panic, and they make some military bad decisions over here, losing them a large portion of North Africa before they're able to push Italy out. Greece just had Athens seized and is capitulating. If you look at the world, it looks like the Yellow Alliance has taken more than the Green Alliance, but the Green Alliance is definitely on the offensive as they land in Gabon. But if you'll remember, this is the region that used to be Mozambique, and it's basically designed at this point to have military gear landed on it, because this is the third time a country is invading a country that owns Mozambique. And just like this is not one landing for Madagascar, this is a couple of landings, as this colony of Yemen is retaken and a strategic retreat is held from the entire region, which allows it to all fall into Green Alliance hands. The Red Sea is also captured at this point, and the Nile is the next target, obviously, of these guys, and with most of Egypt seized, the Green Alliance is doing very well. Another place the Green Alliance is doing well is in Norway and Sweden, and it's around now that the U.S. capitulates fully. Right around now, the Yellow Alliance is getting some more arms to try and help them, but it doesn't help because Norway has already capitulated, and Sweden, while they're still fighting, is not going to be the one receiving aid from the Yellow Alliance, and so they'll also capitulate. Instead, the Yellow Alliance basically decides to do an approach of getting rid of the small targets first. So their first small target they want to get rid of is Madagascar, which is a Chinese colony at this point. But first of all, this is all left, and they then make landings on Madagascar, and China decides to surrender their Madagascar colony because it's not that strategically important once they lose this beachhead. And they instead invest significantly more resources into conquering the Horn of Africa, as well as the Nile region, which is just, like, they are, like, a lot, because remember, there's the Sahara here, so they have gotten a lot of land, and they now start inching closer to Tunisia, as the Mediterranean is slowly being lost by the Yellow Alliance. Austria manages to start pushing back against Germany, but Switzerland remains a fortress. The Yellow Alliance's countries in the Americas are starting to help out, as their full aid is starting to come here, though, and it's, first of all, balancing out Tunisia, and helping to stop the front in Ethiopia. And at this point, there's kind of a stalemate. Neither side is really making any significant gains. So the next thing that happens is Canada will land over here to threaten Japan. And Japan doesn't really care about their Siberian colony, so they weren't really defending it. But because of that, the entire thing falls extremely quickly before it gets to the Chinese border, where China actually was defending it. They also take Sakhalin and are threatening actual Japan, and so now Japan will move their military over here, so whatever troops they were sending, which probably isn't too many, is now over here. But it'll be enough of a distraction to get a little bit of a gain in Africa. Meanwhile, Italy makes another landing on Tunis, and this goes much better than the first one, as Tunis fully capitulates, or Tunisia, I should say. And with the Suez Canal and just generally the Eastern Mediterranean closed off, China makes another invasion of Madagascar, taking back the island and preparing for an invasion of the mainland of Africa, while still invading over here. Then a landing is made in Denmark, as Denmark is now falling. They fall very quickly, and Germany also falls, but Germany doesn't capitulate, whereas Denmark does. And Germany keeps fighting, and eventually a new stalemate line is reached. Then things get even worse for the Yellow Alliance, as Algeria decides to switch sides to avoid being invaded and launches an invasion to the Spanish colony in Morocco. Spain will actually do pretty well here and put the first invasion into the Green Alliance territory in a while, as Algeria is cooked. And this actually leads to Tunisia being freed, because they were expecting Algeria to defend this better than Algeria did. So now they have to redirect some more resources to here, and they redirect it from this front. Japan is finally ready to make a counteroffensive against this colony that's been taken, and they actually do pretty well at it, going to here. But they don't actually retake the northernmost parts. They just wanted to keep the main home islands safe, which they are. So that's nice. Also good for the Green Alliance, another beachhead is established in Mozambique, and this one's even longer than any of the others and will be much more difficult to get rid of, as another landing is made to retake Socotra and land in Ethiopia. As they retake a large portion of this, and then make a landing here, connecting up this beachhead and depriving these guys of any port in the east, which will make it even harder for them to supply the eastern route, as Gabon starts to face massive losses. South Africa, which is part of Gabon, is fully taken, within a week. And this is the height of the Green Alliance, because a big thing is about to happen. The Russian puppet states decide to join the Yellow Alliance in the war and reunite to form Russia, creating a nuisance behind the front lines for the Green Alliance. And with this, they begin an invasion into Finland, and Finland was not defending this border at all with their puppet state. And before long, Finland has to fully withdraw from Norway and Sweden in order to defend their own home country. These islands, as well as Denmark, can be retaken pretty easily. Finland will then be invaded by Norway and Sweden, which they weren't expecting for some reason, and they are now like this. Estonia, realizing that they don't want to be invaded, will switch sides in the war, and this is why things are about to start going downhill for the Green Alliance pretty quickly, as Finland is pretty much taken and they will surrender. And with this new front being opened, China will redirect a bunch of forces here, and they will start obviously an invasion of Russia, and it's going pretty well, but it gets stopped here because the Russian puppet states were planning to switch sides. China now tries to get the Spanish puppet states to switch sides, and before they can, Spain will fully annex them and basically just assert a higher degree of control over these states so that they don't have the ability to switch sides in a war. However, China does successfully get American rebel groups to pop up that the Spanish have to go and put some effort into quelling. which allows for a decent amount of land to be regained on this front, and even for these two islands to be taken, Corsica and Sardinia. However, once those rebellions are quelled, it just goes back to the actual stalemate line, which was the actual feasible place. So that was basically just a waste of troops for China. China desperately tries to hold the front lines, but when a spearhead is basically threatening to cut these guys off from these guys, and in fact does, China decides that they're not going to give up this beachhead, but they're going to scale it down. And so all troops outside of this area are evacuated, and they fiercely defend this, but this area is not even attacked. This does allow China to very easily begin an invasion of Russia, and Georgia will also help. However, a lot of Russia's former allies don't really want to betray Russia and are refusing to invade, especially Poland and Romania are completely just refusing to invade into Russia. They feel sympathetic towards them. Russia helped them so much to get to this point. And this is angering China, who threatens to kick them out of the alliance. Russia knows this sympathy and is therefore refusing to invade into them, and therefore only has to deal with China, which is allowing them to do a decent amount better than they otherwise would. This front finally has a massive battle breakout in which an officer is killed, who's like the commander of this entire North African front. And with that, a new guy has to be rushed in, but this guy's kind of incompetent, so then the third guy gets rushed in, and when the third guy, who's competent again, gets rushed in, this is where the front is at, with most of the Nile having been with a lot of the Nile having been retaken, and because the southern parts of the Nile aren't useful without the northern parts, they're also taken. I don't actually know if that's true, but we're just going to pretend like it is. An assault is made here to split this beachhead in two, and China decides to leave this part and just keep this part for later. They're still desperately hoping that eventually they'll be able to reestablish a front there, but they're now losing on multiple fronts. Japan has finally finished their reconquest of Siberia, and now decides that instead of helping out China, they're going to do their own thing in Alaska, which actually goes very successfully, but also doesn't really help anyone in the war, because Canada was not really helping out with the war anyway, so now they'll just focus on this front. And China's mad at Japan. They're kind of mad at a lot of their allies at this point. And China decides that they're going to try and exert more control over their alliance during a war in which they really need their alliance. And so they establish like a second tier of the alliance, which I'm going to represent with this dark green color. They basically say that you should join this new tier of the alliance. It's like even more defensive capabilities. And they go on about this stuff for a while. And they do manage to get some of their countries to join this new tier of the alliance, as it's called. Like South Korea is their obviously biggest ally. Thailand joins it because they feel like if they don't, they're cooked. And Japan also joins it, but that's it. And the rest of the alliance feels even more alienated. Yeah, and they will start just putting less effort into the war. They're not surrendering or anything. They're just kind of basically turning this into a defensive war, and they basically stop at the borders. So Austria is still fighting to kick these guys out, and these guys decide to leave and see what happens, and Austria will just kind of stops fighting. As Italy leaves Sicily, Bosnia is evacuated, and Greece is left, or mainly in Greece, that is, as China still has troops over here. China's getting really scared at this point, so they finally bribe Yemen into joining their side. And by the way, this new tier of alliance is essentially Chinese puppet status, but Yemen joining their side. This is basically a Chinese puppet, like dark green is kind of a Chinese puppet, but Yemen joining their side creates the last renewed courage for the Chinese alliance, basically doing this. But at this point, a lot of the Chinese allies just formally decide to leave the alliance. They will be led by Russia, who reestablishes their own alliance and immediately has Poland and Romania join it. as well as Georgia, because those were their 3 closest allies throughout the series. Greece is not respecting the deal, the tacit agreement that they just won't invade each other, and they decide to invade into these 3 countries, taking them out of the war. But the Russians have just started a 3rd alliance in the war that is not necessarily aligned to the Yellow Alliance or the Green Alliance, but is their own Red Alliance. And they start pushing back China, as China is just stunned at what happened. And all of a sudden, China says, you're either in or you're out. You're in the Dark Green Alliance or you're in the Red Alliance, but you're not in the Light Green Alliance. That's going to dissolve. Afghanistan, Iran, Oman, and Bulgaria join the Dark Green Alliance, and Italy and Austria join the Red Alliance. This renewed vigor, invasions are commenced into Bulgaria, who decided to join China's alliance, and both the Russian alliance and the Yellow Alliance are against China's alliance. So for now, they're teaming up, and they invade into Bulgaria. Bulgaria doesn't really care about this land, so they basically just let it go, and their whole country is taken over. Parts of Greece are now getting invaded into by Russia, so Greece puts more effort into liberating their territories in Turkey as well as Cyprus. Eventually they meet over here. And at this point, China is getting beaten back, just like how the US kind of lost their army at the end of the war in episode 9. China kind of no longer has an army, and like anyone who was in their army is kind of starting to defect. Their allies are still able to hold on, which is why it's taking it so long for this to happen. But like Madagascar is completely seized. Australia, when China said you're in or you're out, let's just say that's the name of the policy. Indonesia joins the Chinese alliance, whereas Australia just left the alliance and is now neutral. Iran, seeing the tide of the war, will switch sides, and they will start basically cutting off any aid that these guys are getting from China, which is not much, which is why these guys are pretty much still fighting on their own. And once Yemen's colony over here is taken, they realize that it's futile, but the Yellow Alliance feels like they can get unconditional surrender, so they demand it. And Yemen will surrender, but Oman will not. And they need to learn the hard way that they should have surrendered, which they have, so now they surrender. And now a race happens between the Red Alliance and the Yellow Alliance in the Middle East, but what happens is essentially that China's kicked out. And now Iran and Russia start invading into Afghanistan. And for once in Afghanistan's history, they are just not doing well at defending. As Russia starts invading into Siberia, and these parts of Siberia are not easy to invade, but Russia is much better at warfare in them than China is. And so large swaths of Siberia are taken very quickly, because Russia actually knows how to invade Siberia, whereas China just got Siberia like a few years ago. And within weeks, Russia has taken like probably all of this territory, let's say. And remember, China doesn't really have a military anymore, so Afghanistan is still defending. But the Yellow Alliance doesn't want the Red Alliance to get this powerful after the war, so they send their own thing and land in the southern tip of India to start invading into China as well as into Afghanistan. They also send a whole other army to take out Indonesia, and that works pretty well as Indonesia surrenders. They then start marching them to Thailand, who quickly surrender. The Russians are still making swaths of progress as they land into the northern parts of Japan. Meanwhile, this invasion of India is still on its way as China loses their southern coast, as well as the northern part of the Philippines, the island of Taiwan. This island, these are not doing well. Kyushu is even landed on, as there's now a race for Japan, and the two alliances meet in the middle. South Korea, seeing this, will surrender specifically to the Yellow Alliance. And with Kabul being threatened, Afghanistan will also do the same. China will not unconditionally surrender, They are continuing to fight on. They believe that they are superior, and well, we'll just see how that goes for them. As Russia is invading, the Yellow Alliance steps up their game and starts invading more quickly, and many Chinese cities surrender, as most of the Chinese population is now taken, but China still refuses to surrender. A large population of Chinese land is encircled and surrenders to Russia, but China still refuses to surrender. Korea, in exchange for guaranteed existence after the war, starts their own invasion of China and captures Beijing, but China still refuses to surrender. Russia captures this land, no surrender. Captures this land, China is still not surrendering. They lose their entire coastline, but they still haven't surrendered. Russia starts a deeper invasion over here. China still hasn't surrendered. They lose all their land. Their government flees to exile in a mystery country and still hasn't surrendered. But without any land, the Allies can start dividing them up. This is the peace treaty after the war. The only country that was created, or I guess two, or North and South China. This is a possession of South China. Korea is independent. India is independent. Australia is independent. India is made into independent as a buffer state. But don't think this situation is going to last very long because the Yellow Alliance has had enough. They know they're the stronger of the two factions. And so, before the Red Alliance can recruit any of the three neutral nations, the Yellow Alliance will send an invasion into Italy. And it'll be so rapid that Russia won't really have time to react to it before it's over. And Spain will fully annex Italy. And then they'll send an ultimatum to all of Russia's allies: switch sides or be obliterated. Austria will switch sides, Iran will switch sides, and that's it. And so the others have chosen be obliterated, and the invasion of Poland will commence. And it will go very well and very quick, as these countries are more tired of war than the Yellow Alliance is, as in the second half of the war they weren't really doing that much work, whereas the Red Alliance was doing all the work for them. And just like that, Poland has been defeated. They surrender. Romania will hold out a little longer, but they too will surrender. Georgia will then take their turn being invaded, and will hold out not very long before they also surrender. South China will be invaded, or North China will be invaded into by South China, and before long, their entire population base is done, and they decide to switch sides to break away from Russia. Meanwhile, Japan has been taken by South China, and invasions of the Russian East are taking place via Canada, who's invading across the Bering Strait. And the thing is, Russia hasn't even had time to set up defenses in this territory yet, and they're really dangerously low on men. And so very quickly, they will lose all the Siberian territory they had previously taken, as invasions from the west and east force them into submission. And this is the peace that has come of that war. There's now 3 countries that are not in the Yellow Alliance, and they all breathe a huge gulp as we go into the finale of Worldwide Battle Royale, in which I will see you next time.